when I got to the island, I noticed that one of the challenges that I'm going to have here is the reliable power supply because there'll be I experienced several brownouts while I was here in the first few months, right? So I reached out to a solar provider previously, and then we had a conversation, and they said that they can put together a package for me, and they recommended a hybrid setup, which means that I would still be reliant on the electricity provider here, the grid, and then once there's a power interruption, then the solar will kick in. So I said, okay, let's do that. So we put together the infrastructure for that. We had the solar panels installed on the roof, and then for the first month it was working okay. Brownout, then solar kicks, and then after a month, and that was the time when I went back to Sydney because I was still living in Sydney. I was like back and forth from Sydney and Siquijor. Um, the solar wasn't working anymore, so power goes out. The solar will sometimes kick in, will sometimes not. And when it kicks in, it will kick in for like an hour, 2 hours, and then we were out of power again. So I said, this is not a good setup. So I contacted the provider and had some conversations with them, and they were telling me a lot about system losses, the battery not charging enough, and the battery wasn't charging from the solar panel. It was charging from the electricity from Proselco, which means that I'm not getting the benefit of lower electricity cost and a reliable electricity, so that when the power goes out, then there's another sort of alternative power that will kick in. So that was a bit of a nightmare for me because I invested some money in that, and I was so sort of frustrated for like a few months. I think I was frustrated for like 6 months because it wasn't really working. So I was like back and forth to Sydney and Siquijor, and that was one of my issues there. And then I met Gali. We met online initially. We were working on a different project back then. We were working on alternative farming approaches. And then we had a conversation about solar, and I saw his farm having his own sort of solar power energy sort of system. And then I said, why don't we have a look at my setup here? Because I told him about my plan of having an ice plant and probably having a resort here, etc. And we had a conversation about how much power I need based on the plans that I have. And sort of we calculated that, we calculated the cost, etc. And then I also approached another solar provider, and I told them about the same need, and they were quoting me for 4 million pesos. And I said, what? 4 million? That's like my retirement fund already now. But it's like, yeah, it's too much. Whereas the cost that Gali has told me is sort of not even a fraction of a million. So it's very cheap. I mean, it's not cheap. It's cost effective for what I need. So I said, okay, let's proceed with it. So Gali and I had a conversation about that. So we had a look at the sources for the panels, the inverter, the controller, the battery, etc. How much battery I need, and then the infrastructure for that, like the poles, the sort of the where the solar is going to be placed, the panels are going to be placed, etc. So after, it didn't take more than a month. Actually, it took less than a month to build the whole thing, and then within a month I was like up and running. I've been energized already, and it's an off-grid solar system, which means a solar power system, which means that I'm not reliant on the grid anymore. So, and that's really good. There are only one or two appliances that still is connected to the grid, but the whole sort of system that I have is off-grid system. And since then, I realized that it might be something that the community can benefit from if we can replicate this to sort of a critical mass. Then there's probably an understanding of uh, we have an alternative source of power or alternative source of electricity using solar and not relying on the grid.